Hello, this is Bruno Pelletier-Bacquaert. Thank you for stopping by. This is going to be the next episode for our little exploration of the 2-5-1s, which very quickly became a turnaround. So to recap, well, first of all, I would invite you to watch the previous two videos. But I was showing you in the key of A flat major how we were starting from a 2 chord, so that's a B flat minor 7 going to E flat 7, arriving at A flat major 7, and then completing the cycle with either an A flat 6, which also happens to be an F minor 7th, same chord, same 4 notes. So then we saw different inversions, and I hope you spent a little time, working through those inversions, because they're not all very obvious. So it takes a lot of thinking, but eventually this will become second nature for you guys to pick up those inversions. But now it's actually getting even more interesting, a lot more interesting, if you ask me, because we are going to deal with some chord substitutions. It's still going to be pretty reasonable. We're not going to go way out there and play all kinds of weird things as subs, but I think I'm going to put you on the right track for you guys to start exploring this. So pretty much, well, actually, what is going to happen on this cycle, on this turnaround cycle that we have, we are going to look for substitutions on the dominant chords. So there's some things that could be done with the minor 7th chord, some things that could be done with the A flat major 7th chord, and so forth. But we're not going to go there yet. Let's talk about the dominant chord, the E flat 7. So I'm going to start through with the chords in this area. Now there's a PDF that you'll be able to download. There's going to be a link, most likely in the notes. So look for it. There's going to be a link, and you will be able to download a PDF with not only all the substitutions, but also all the inversions of the substitutions. See, we're getting there. It's getting to be a bunch of papers, right? So I'm not going to demonstrate everything. I'll just show you everything from the first original position, which was this one. So the B flat minor here going to this E flat 7. So what can we do with this E flat 7? Well, the first thing that we can think of is use a substitution that is still diatonic. Remember, I'm in the key of A flat major 7, and I am going to think of the half diminished chord in that key. In this case, it would be the 7th degree, G half diminished, and I could play this chord. And how do I relate this chord to an E flat dominant? Well, you might realize that this would be an E flat 9, right? I have E flat, G, D flat, and F. And if I were simply to replace the root with the 5th of the chord, I would have a B flat at the bottom. So this chord can be called still E flat 7, 9, or E flat 9. Usually people like to abbreviate that way. So E flat 9. The fact that we have the 5th in the bass does not change the name of the chord. But those 4 notes also happen to be a G minor 7 flat 5, also known as G half diminished. G, D flat, and F. There you go. And after that, I could then resolve to my A flat major 7. So the cycle would be this: 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I continue to my F minor 7, and then use that cycle again. I would certainly invite you to do this thing in time, many times. Okay? All right? So our first substitution here is a G half diminished which is actually from the third of the dominant chord. So that's one thing you can keep in mind. If you are looking for some kind of dominant 9 sound, you can simply think the minor 7 flat 5 chord from the third of your dominant. Okay, so in this case, E flat is the root, G is the third, so I could play, this is another voicing for G half diminished, I would get the E flat 9 sound. That's one thing. The next chord we're going to look at, and you will see that if you go down the column of your dominant chords on the PDF that you will hopefully find and download, I'm going to substitute a diminished 7th chord, still from the third of my dominant chord. So here in this area, the third is still G, right? And instead of the G half diminished that we were looking at just a minute ago, now I'm going to play a G diminished 7th. So there's one note that is different. I have now an E natural on top. And that chord, I'm calling it G diminished 7th, but you might already know that any note of a diminished 7th chord may be thought of as being the root. So in other words, this is also a B flat diminished 7, it's also a D flat diminished 7, and it's also an E diminished 7. The diminished 7 chord having the luxury of moving around like this in minor thirds, and it's the same 4 notes that keep repeating themselves. And probably should do a whole video on some of the aspects of the diminished 7 chord, because it's a very, very commonly used chord and it offers a lot of great options. So for now, I'm calling it still G diminished 7 in place of my E flat 7, and that will resolve as usual into my A flat major 7. So what's interesting here, well, let me play the cycle and you'll notice what happens. So B flat minor 7, here's my diminished 7th chord, and here's the A flat major 7 going to the same F minor. What you might be noticing on top is this little movement on top of all the first 3 chords. It's very smooth, it moves in the same direction in half steps, and it's quite desirable as far as the voice leading is concerned. Okay, so now I could actually do both. G minor 7 flat 5, then diminish, and going to the A flat. So 2 beats each. Again, I'll do that. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? That way I combine both of the substitutions within the same measure. 2 beats each. All right, the next substitution that we're going to look at, it may or may not be thought of as a substitution. It could simply be an alteration of the E flat. What I'm looking at is this chord. If I'm thinking of this chord as being an E flat 7 with the 5th in the bass, that 5th could be tweaked, could be altered, and I could simply flat it. So in other words, my perfect 5th, B flat, can be lowered down to a diminished 5th, in which case I could think of this chord as being an E flat 7, flat 5. It so happens that the 5th is in the bass, but that still is an E flat dominant chord, right? So I have this 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can cycle that many times. So it's simply an altered chord. You know, I altered in this case means I'm simply changing one of the notes in my chord, but it still is an E flat 7. But the other way to look at this exact same voicing is to think of it as actually an A dominant 7 chord, of which the top note is also a flatted 5th. So in other words, this very voicing can have two possible roots. Either it's an E flat 7, flat 5 with the 5th in the bass, or it's an A dominant 7 with the flatted 5th on top of the chord. And this A7 is known as the tritone substitution of E flat. That again could be the topic of a whole other discussion. We may substitute an A7 for an E flat dominant. The only thing that changes when I simplify the chords like this is the roots, but my thirds and sevens are the same. This is G, the third of the E flat, D flat, the seventh of E flat, if I put E flat in the bass. And if I use A as the tonic, then G would now be the seventh of the A chord, whereas D flat, which theoretically I should probably call now C sharp, same note but no different name, is now the third of the A7 chord. Okay, so whether we look at it as a tritone substitution or an E flat 7 with a flat 5, it doesn't matter, it's the same chord. And the last substitution on the first column of the dominant chord would be still an A7, but now with a perfect fifth. So that's as generic an A dominant 7 chord as you can think. But it's out of context. You know, coming from my B flat minor 7, if I now play my A7 and then resolve to this A flat, I have again this nice movement on top of my chords and some interesting sounds, because if I were to analyze the four notes of my A7 against the original E flat dominant chord, what do I have? Well, A is the flatted fifth, G is still the third of E flat, D flat is still the seventh of E flat, whereas E natural would be a flat 9. So I get a flat 9, flat 5 chord here. So I'll do this one in time. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and still going to the same F minor. Okay. Now, I didn't talk about the last column on your PDFs, which is a substitution for that F minor 7. So, very often in the context of a turnaround, since we want that cycle to be more or less permanent, it could be a never-ending cycle, you know, of chords going through. Very often we would substitute a dominant chord from the same root of the F. So instead of F minor 7th, you could actually think of your chord as being an F dominant 7th, in which case that F7 would become the 5 of the B flat 7, you know, the B flat minor 7, which is the 2 chord. So that way you have this permanent cycle. It keeps feeding on itself. So I'm not going to play a generic F7, which would be this. It's not the greatest sound in this case, but there's a couple things I can do with it. The first thing I can do is turn it as well into a diminished 7 chord. So what is the third of my F7? It would be A. Okay, so then I could play an A diminished 7, and that A diminished 7 is going to lead really well into the B flat minor 7 chord if I want to keep the cycle going. So let's say I'm going to use diminished 7 chords on top of both dominants. So I have B flat minor 7. This is my G diminished 7 chord, going to A flat major 7 chord, and this is an A diminished 7 chord, which functions like an F7 flat 9. Okay, so I'll do this one last time. 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can cycle forever on it. Okay, and the last chord I want to show you is an altered F7. So if this were my generic F7, now I'm going to tweak the fifth. I'm going to raise it. So the C note, the C natural, is going to become a C sharp. So if you look at this grip for your F7, this is going to be your F7 sharp 5. And that sharp 5 note will morph into the minor third of your B flat minor 7 if you keep the cycle going. So you get this 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and then go again for the cycle. Okay? So that's it. That's it. So that's a bunch of formulas you could use, because you don't have to go necessarily from left to right. You can use your B flat minor 7 chord, use any one of the substitution in the column for the E flat 7, then go to the A flat chord, and then use any one of the chords that is in the column for the F minor. So I haven't done the math, but if you multiply all the possibilities, by each other, you probably have I don't know, I'm guessing a good dozen or 15 possibilities. Don't quote me on the numbers. I did not do the math, right? I don't even remember how many chords that I actually put in, but that's all the chords I put in on what you see on the first page. Those are the ones I played here. But as I start saying, you do have all the inversions of those very same chords, right? The good news is the inversions of the diminished chords, that's the same grips, all right? So if you know the grip for the G diminished chord, well, you have it here: root position, third in the bass, fifth in the bass, diminished seventh in the bass, and so forth. So the diminished 7 chord, that's a no-brainer. That's going to be the same inversion throughout. But the other chords, they have their own different fingerings for each one of the inversions. Okay, so I hope you get really excited about starting all these. Like any kind of chordal work, it takes a lot of time. You have to be consistent with your practice, because this is only in one key. So try things in different keys. Every week try to tackle a new key, explore your 2-5-1s, your turnarounds, your substitutions in your key of the week. And also you will notice that there are some that you like and some that you don't quite like. Whether you're not prepared to like them, maybe it's too early, your ears are not quite attuned to hearing the sounds that you might consider somewhat dissonant. Also, some of the fingerings might be difficult. They may not be fingerings that you think you will go to in the middle of an improvisation. And then there's also some that just don't sound that great, as inversions. They might sound good in one particular voicing, but then as you move on to the next inversion, all of a sudden the voicing itself is not as pleasing. So a lot of that is personal preferences and so on. All I can say is explore, keep trying, keep absorbing new voicings, new grips, new sounds, and then just remember to have fun along the way. Okay. So as usual, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to communicate with me. You can just simply reply in the comments at the bottom of this video, or send me direct emails or whatever. Okay. So that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.